Welcome to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all of our 7th graders out there, though anyone is welcome to tune in. This lesson is the first in this week's series. My name is Mrs. Alley, and I'm a 7th grade teacher for Tennessee schools. I'm so excited to be your teacher for this lesson today. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lessons, you can find them at www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune into today's lesson if you haven't seen any of our others. Today we will be learning about the Great Migration and the Harlem Renaissance. Before we get started, to participate fully in today's lesson, you're going to need a few things: pencil, paper, a surface to write on, and the student packet for ELA Grade 7, Lesson 16, which can be found at www.tn.gov. Let's get started. Today our goal is to use evidence from text and images to build knowledge about the Great Migration and the Harlem Renaissance, two related events in United States history. We will begin with me showing you what that looks like, and then there will be time for you to practice on your own with my support. Finally, I will assign you independent work you can complete after the video ends. We will begin our lesson about the Harlem Renaissance by looking at some paintings by a man named Jacob Lawrence. These paintings are part of a set called the Migration Series. There are actually 60 paintings in this collection that tell a story, but we will only look at a fraction of them. Jacob Lawrence wanted to make a visual history of the Great Migration. I know you may not be familiar with the Great Migration yet. This lesson and the next few lessons will change that. Let's start by talking about what migration means. Have you heard the word migration before? I know migration from when birds move during the fall to fly south for the winter. Migration can also refer to people moving from one region to another. Let's see what we can learn from these paintings about why people migrated from one area to another. Because these images are a part of the migration series, I know the artist is trying to convey some ideas about migration in general, or maybe one specific migration through these images. To keep track of my thinking, I will make a note catcher with 2 columns, like this. I will write what I notice on the left side and what I wonder on the right. It's my job as a viewer to make sense of what I see. So at the end of our art tour, I will look at my notes and see what the larger ideas might be. I'll give you a few moments to make this note catcher on your paper. When we jot notes, we want to make them brief, in words and phrases, not in complete sentences. The notes are there to jog our memories when we review them. Here is painting number 1. Let me take a few seconds to consider what I notice. I see a lot of people crowded together near some doorways, and the doorways have names of cities at the top: Chicago, New York, St. Louis. It looks like they might be at a bus station or maybe a train station. Oh, I just noticed all of the people seem to be African American. I wonder why they are all going to these 3 cities. Is this the migration the artist is talking about? People going to those cities? I'm going to jot some quick notes on my note catcher. Make sure you've got some in your note catcher too. This is another painting in the series. Take a minute to jot down what you notice and wonder about this image. What did you write down? I'm thinking these folks are walking with their luggage, unlike the ones in the previous image who were taking a train or a bus. They sure look like they are taking all their belongings in those bags. I am just going to write luggage under what I notice, and are they moving under what I wonder. Did you write something similar? I'm definitely starting to think that these folks moving is the migration the artist is focused on. Okay, what is going on in these images? Take a moment to record what you notice and wonder. Yes, I had the same idea as you. This family looks like they are having a hard time and feeling unsatisfied with the little food they have. I see how the two adults have their heads down and how there is only a single pot on the wall. In the other painting, the woman is slicing some sort of slab of food that doesn't look very appealing, while the skinny boy looks on. Let me think what I can write in a few words for what I notice. Okay, I'll jot poor hungry family. That makes me wonder if these paintings show a reason people moved. Maybe they're escaping poverty. I'll write that down, escaping poverty. This is image number 13. What does it show? Jot down your thoughts. To me, this looks like a field from a farm, but it looks like the crops are dead. I wonder if there was a drought because I see a bright sun and no rain. I'll jot down dead crops and drought. This is another image in the series. What is depicted in this painting? I had to look really closely. The people in it are drinking from different fountains, but that's not the only thing that is different. The woman in the back is white, and the ladies in the front are African American. This reminds me of when Martin Luther King Jr. and his friends protested against a lot of the things that were unfair and people were separated by color. What was that called? Yes, I think you're right. It was called segregation. Could another reason for the migration be to have more freedom? I'll record that I notice separate fountains and that I wonder about wanting more freedom. Here is image number 22. What do you think is happening here? These men are handcuffed and you can't see their faces. I wonder if Lawrence painted their backs rather than their faces to communicate that this happened to African Americans no matter who they were. If that's the case, then people may have migrated for more justice and equality. Let me jot that down in my note catcher. Handcuffed men and looking for justice and equality. This is image number 28. What do you notice and wonder? Remember to write down notes each time so you have a record of your thoughts. These African American men seem to be talking to the white man and doing something with a piece of paper. They look interested, and the one man looks like he is signing the paper. What is he signing? I'll jot down meeting with a white man and what are they signing on my note catcher. This is image number 31. What do you notice and wonder? Jot down your thoughts. I see these tall buildings and think they might be apartments. I wonder if the men who signed that paper were signing for a new place to live. Let's jot that down. Here is image number 36. What do you see here? Jot down your thoughts. It sure looks like some sort of factory, but there are also some animals fenced in. I see some of you are wondering what kind of factory it is, and others may be wondering about where the factory is. I think I even see some of you are thinking about those men who signed the papers and if they could be working at the factory now. Maybe they had a signed contract. Here are images number 37 and 38. What do you notice and wonder about these images? Jot down your thoughts in your note catcher. Did you notice these are different industries, steel and railroad? Yes, the steel was tricky to figure out. Good thinking. You might be wondering about whether the factory and these two images mean there were better jobs in these industries compared to that field we saw earlier. Remember, the dead-looking crops and the bright sun? Let's add this. This is image number 44. What do you notice and wonder? As compared to an earlier image, this one shows some delicious food, ham and steak, I think. I was wondering that too. If all this is about migration or movement of people from one region to another, maybe the place they went had better food as well as better jobs. Did they tell their friends back home to migrate too? Let's add this to our notes. This is image number 45. What's happening in this painting? This family looks like they are on the train and are excited to be in the city because they are looking out the window at the factory. Are more people migrating to be near the factory jobs? Let's jot that down. These are images number 49 and number 51. What's going on in these images? You're right. These paintings depict unhappier situations. Image number 49 shows more segregation between black and white people, like with those water fountains we saw earlier, but this time it's in a restaurant. And then on the right is an artistic representation of fires in buildings. Lots of different questions out there. How did the fire start? Was it on purpose? Was there segregation in the new place too, even with the better jobs and food? How did that feel to the African Americans who had migrated to these places? Let's jot some of this down in our note catcher. This is image number 54. What do you notice here? Yes, this is a church. People are praying together. What do you wonder? Me too. I wonder how the church helped people face difficulties like fires and segregation. Let's jot that down. This is image number 58. What does Lawrence portray in this painting? What does it make you wonder? Jot down your thinking. I definitely agree. The girls are writing numbers on the chalkboard. So he is saying something about school here. Maybe in addition to better food and jobs, there were better educational opportunities for African Americans in the places they migrated to as well. That could be a good reason to move. Students, let's review our notes from the migration series and see if we can articulate what Jacob Lawrence taught us through his artwork about the historical event we call the Great Migration. Here are the things we noticed. When I reread this list, it seems like a pattern is that the images generally tell a story of going from negative circumstances to more positive ones, except for that one point about segregation and fires. Now let's look at our questions and see if you can see a story in them too. What story do the questions suggest about the Great Migration? Jot down your ideas. I see you have some thoughtful ideas. You probably wrote one of these ideas. People migrated to escape bad situations and to have more freedom and opportunity. People migrated in hopes of a better future. People migrated because they wanted a better life for themselves and their families. People wanted the opportunity to make their dreams come true. I don't know about you, but I think it is incredible how Jacob Lawrence conveyed such important ideas about the Great Migration in these paintings. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and now I understand what that saying means. Images communicate meaning too. Now that we have been introduced to some of the central ideas of the Great Migration, opportunity, hope, dreams, freedom, let's learn more about the details of this time period. We are going to read The Harlem Renaissance, A Cultural Rebirth by James Hall. Make a new I notice and I wonder chart on another piece of paper to capture your thinking. Remember, these are notes, so you will just write down words and phrases. I especially want to jot things that are key ideas. Great waves of African Americans migrated to northern cities to take advantage of the many factory jobs that opened up in response to World War I, 1914 to 1918. Students, I'm going to jot this down because it helps me remember the Great Migration. World War I led to factory jobs in northern cities. Unfortunately, social attitudes of the early 20th century forced these Black folks to settle in segregated urban housing. So they created bustling Black metropolises, cities within cities. This caused a period of remarkable artistic and intellectual activity in New York City's African American community, leading to the Harlem Renaissance. What's a metropolis? It is not just a city, but a busy city with lots of activity. We know this because the sentence uses the word bustling to describe metropolises. A Renaissance is a revival period of intellectual or artistic achievement and activity. It comes from a French word, naissance, which means birth. So Renaissance is like a rebirth, in this case of ideas and art, in the African American community in New York City. Let me show you where New York City is. Tennessee is not on this map, but it is located below where Indiana is past Kentucky. There are many states in between New York and Tennessee. Harlem is in New York City on the island of Manhattan. It is located at the top of Manhattan Island. Let's jot what we want to remember here. I definitely want to remember that Harlem is in New York City and that it was the neighborhood where many African Americans lived. I want to remember the phrase Harlem Renaissance, but what I want to know is how did it begin? Go ahead and record that. While other cities saw similar developments and had their own rebirths, at the time, New York City was very much the cultural capital of the United States. It was a publishing and writing center, home to most of the significant museums and galleries, and site of major music venues. Thus, the largely African American neighborhood called Harlem, located in northern Manhattan, is viewed as the starting point of the modern Black artistic movement. From around 1923 to the beginning of the Great Depression in 1929, Black writers and artists who gathered in Harlem generated an extraordinary amount and diversity of conversation, debate, and culture. What notes should I capture? I think I should note that New York City was the cultural capital and Harlem was the center of the Black artistic and intellectual movement in the 1920s. I wonder who were the most significant writers and artists in the Harlem Renaissance. An important first impact of the Harlem Renaissance was the wide range of political action taken by both organizations and individuals who demanded improvements in the African American economic and educational opportunities. After Black soldiers had participated honorably during World War I, they hoped to come back to an America ready to accept and recognize their contributions and accomplishments. But outbreaks of racial violence due to the legality of Jim Crow laws dashed these hopes. Students, Jim Crow laws were the legal practice of discriminating against and suppressing African Americans. The segregated drinking fountains and restaurants in Jacob Lawrence's paintings were part of the Jim Crow laws. So were the laws against voting by African Americans and many other laws. The last paragraph talked about artists and thinkers, so I thought I would read about them. But this paragraph says it's more important to know that Black individuals and organizations advocated for improving economic and educational opportunities. Now I'm wondering if and how they succeeded. The African American migrants, or people who moved from one place to another, in Lawrence's works had dreams of better jobs and educational opportunities. Now I'm wondering how they fought Jim Crow laws. Please jot these in your notes. Legal protection then, especially against lynching, became a priority for African Americans. Organizations such as the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the National Urban League, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People all had headquarters in New York. They started magazines, held rallies and marches, and argued their ideas in all kinds of ways. Let's add some of these ideas to our note catcher. Though the political beliefs of each group differed, they shared the conviction that it was time for the emergence of a new Negro in both person and attitude, one who was no longer willing to accept the status quo. Indeed, many historians believe that the New Negro movement is a more accurate term for the development of Black life in the 1920s than Harlem Renaissance. Let's add a key idea and a question to our note catcher. A number of individuals, including W.E.B. Du Bois, James Weldon Johnson, and Arthur Schomburg, began to reflect on how cultural activity might aid the African American community in its struggle. That was the last paragraph of this passage. I cannot believe it ends there because it starts to talk about the very question we just asked about how the art and literature or culture connects with the fight for equality and protection under the law. There's still more to learn about the Harlem Renaissance in the coming days, especially the literature. Today we learned about the Great Migration by examining Jacob Lawrence's artwork in the Migration series and determining the key ideas he conveyed. Then we read about the Harlem Renaissance and pulled out key ideas from the text as well. Now we'll need to weave our learning about the Great Migration and the Harlem Renaissance together. For independent practice, use your notes from today to write a short response to this question. How do the ideas in Lawrence's paintings of the Great Migration connect to the beliefs in the Harlem Renaissance? Please copy down the question on your paper. I enjoyed learning about the Great Migration and the Harlem Renaissance with you today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you on the next lesson in Tennessee's At Home Learning series. Bye.